Puente, The Death House Landlady by me, Donovan Bowman. Here is some background info. Dorothy was born on January 9th, 1929. She died on March 27th, 2011. She was nicknamed the Death House Landlady. She had 9 confirmed kills and 6 unconfirmed kills. Her killing span rose from 1982 to 1988. Her targets were mainly elderly people or mentally disabled people. After killing her target, she would cash their Social Security check for their money. Her childhood. Dorothy had a rough childhood growing up. Her parents were both alcoholics, and her dad repeatedly talked about suicide. Her dad later died in 1937 from tuberculosis. Her mom lost custody of her children in 1938, and Dorothy's mom died later that same year. Dorothy was sent to an orphanage along with the other siblings, where she was abused. At the age of 16, she got her first marriage with Fred McFall in 1945, who had just returned from the Pacific Theater in World War II. She had 2 daughters with McFall between 1946 and 1948. However, she sent one of them to live with family in Sacramento and placed the other one up for adoption. And then in spring of 1948, Dorothy was caught purchasing women's accessories and clothing with forged checks in Riverside. She was arrested and found guilty on 2 different cases of forgery. She served 4 months in jail. Since this was her first crime, she was given 3 years prohibition. 6 years after this offense, she left Riverside. In San Francisco in 1952, she married for her second time Axel Brent Johansson. She created a fake person calling herself Tea Singola Nayarda. She claimed that she was of Egyptian and Israeli descent. She also said she was a follower of the Muslim religion. Dorothy took advantage of Axel's frequent trips away by inviting men over and gambling his money away. In 1960, Dorothy was accused and arrested for owning a brothel in Sacramento. She was only sentenced to prison for 80 days after claiming innocence. Her husband Johansson briefly sent her to DeWitt State Hospital after a series of drinking, criminal behavior, lying, and suicide attempts. Doctors there had diagnosed her as a pathological liar with an unstable personality. Dorothy and Johansson divorced in 1966. In April of 1982, a 61-year-old Ruth Monroe began to live with Dorothy in her upstairs apartment, but died of an overdose of codeine. Dorothy told the police that Ruth killed herself because of a depression from her husband being mentally ill. The police believed Dorothy's claim and claimed that the death was because of a suicide. A couple weeks later, the police arrived at Dorothy's house claiming that a 74-year-old man she named Malcolm McKenzie had accused her of drugging him and stealing from him. She was charged with theft 3 times and sentenced to 5 imprisoned years on August 18, 1982. She began to converse with a 77-year-old man named Everson Gilmouth. They developed a pen pal relationship, and when Dorothy was released in 1985, after only serving part of her sentence, Everson was waiting for her in a 1980 red Ford pickup truck. They eventually made wedding plans. In November of 1985, Dorothy hired a man named Ismael Flores to install wood paneling in her apartment. For the work he had done, Dorothy gave him $800 and a well-conditioned red Ford pickup, claiming it belonged to her boyfriend in Los Angeles who no longer wanted it. She also asked him to build a 6-foot by 3-foot by 2-foot box to store books and other items. She asked Flores to transport the filled and nailed shut box to a storage depot. On the way to the depot, Dorothy asked the man to stop on the Garden Highway in Sutter County and dump the box into the riverbank in an unofficial household dumping site. Dorothy claimed the box was filled with junk and things she didn't need anymore. On January 1st, 1986, a fisherman found the box sitting 3 feet away from the bank and informed the police. What they found inside the box was a badly decomposed and unidentified body of an elderly man inside. Dorothy wrote letters to Everson's family about that he couldn't contact them because he was ill. Everson's body remained unidentified for 3 years. Dorothy continued to accept elderly tenants and became popular among social workers. She collected tenants' monthly mail before they saw it and paid them in stipends, taking the rest for expenses. Suspicion first occurred when the neighbors noticed odd activity from a homeless man named Chief. Dorothy claimed that she had adopted him and made him her personal handyman. Dorothy had Chief dig in the basement and cart soil away in a wheelbarrow. At the time, the basement floor was a concrete slab. Chief later took down the garage and installed a concrete slab there. Soon after the slide was installed, Chief had disappeared. On November 11th, 1988, police became suspicious of the mysterious disappearance of Alberto Montoya, a mentally disabled man whose social worker had reported to the police he was missing. After the police noticed a search sale on Dorothy's property, they uncovered 7 different bodies. Dorothy was charged with 9 total murders. Everson Gilmouth and 8 tenants who lived at the boarding house. During the first investigation, Dorothy wasn't ruled as a suspect. She went to get coffee at a nearby coffee shop, but then immediately fled for Los Angeles with a man she had met in a bar. However, the man noticed the police reports of Dorothy, then he called the police.